It was a regular afternoon in Los Angeles, the sun casting a warm glow over the bustling streets. Elon Musk, as usual, was in his Tesla, racing from one meeting to another, his mind racing with the weight of the world's expectations. The future of space exploration, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, his thoughts never seemed to stop. But today, as he navigated through the city's endless traffic, something unexpected happened that would change everything. As Elon's car smoothly cruised down a quiet side street, something caught his eye, a figure sitting alone at the corner of the sidewalk. At first, he almost dismissed it, but then his gaze lingered. A young woman, no older than her 20s, was sitting on the curb. Her clothes were ragged, her face pale and tired. She had a cardboard sign next to her that read, "Hungry. Anything helps." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Elon's mind raced, and his hand hovered over the steering wheel, unsure of what to do. In that instant, the world outside the car seemed to fade away. There, on the side of the road, was a person in need, someone who had no home, no resources, nothing. What if it were me? Elon thought. What if it were someone I loved? He took a deep breath and did something he rarely ever did. He stopped. The hum of the Tesla came to a halt as he pressed the brake. He looked around. The street was empty, save for a few pedestrians in the distance, unaware of the moment unfolding in front of them. His heart pounded in his chest. Was he doing the right thing? The world expected him to keep moving forward, to stay focused on his ambitious goals, but something tugged at him, a feeling he couldn't ignore. The young woman looked up as the car stopped in front of her. Her eyes were dull, but when she saw him, they seemed to light up for just a second. She stood up slowly, brushing off the dirt from her knees, unsure of what was happening. Elon got out of the car, his feet hitting the pavement with a soft thud. The world seemed quieter now, the noise of the city muffled by the intensity of the moment. He walked toward her, every step deliberate, as if his body knew something his mind hadn't fully processed yet. When he reached her, he didn't know what to say at first. "Hey," he began awkwardly, his voice soft yet firm. "Are you okay?" The woman didn't immediately respond, but her eyes, those tired, exhausted eyes, spoke volumes. She was not okay. She was far from it. I'm doing fine," she stammered, her voice shaky. "Just trying to survive." Elon didn't know how to respond, but in that moment, he felt a strange connection to her, something beyond words. There was no pity, no judgment, just two human beings facing the raw truth of life. He could see the years of hardship in her face, the story of struggle written in every wrinkle and tear. It was as if, for just a brief moment, everything else, the billion-dollar deals, the rocket launches, the deadlines, didn't matter. Only this moment did. "You're not alone," he said, his words carrying more weight than he intended. "I'll make sure of that." The woman's eyes widened. She was probably expecting another passerby to toss her a few bucks or keep walking. But this was different. Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world, a man whose name was synonymous with innovation and ambition, had stopped for her. "Thank you," she whispered, though she didn't quite believe it. Elon paused, taking in the weight of the situation. His mind was racing, but in his gut, he knew this was a turning point. He couldn't just leave her here, not after everything he had achieved in his life. Not after the billions he had made in space exploration, electric cars, and renewable energy. Wasn't it time to focus on something else? Something that truly mattered? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As Elon helped her gather the few belongings she had left, he made a decision. This moment would not just fade into the background of his busy life. No, this was something that would stay with him, something that would shape the future of both his life and hers. There was no going back now, and as they walked toward the car, Elon couldn't shake the thought that had just entered his mind. What if this was the moment that changed everything? Elon Musk's story had always been one of relentless ambition. From the time he was a child growing up in Pretoria, South Africa, he was always driven by a thirst for knowledge and a vision of changing the world. At an early age, he developed a love for computers and technology. By the time he was in high school, he had already taught himself programming and created a video game, which he sold for a few $100s. That drive to create, to innovate, had stayed with him ever since. As he moved to the United States and entered the world of Silicon Valley, his dreams only grew larger. He co-founded Zip2, then X.com, which later became PayPal, and eventually founded Tesla, SpaceX, and a host of other companies that would earn him a fortune beyond what anyone could have imagined. But with all that success came a price. Elon's personal life, despite all the wealth and accolades, had often felt like a series of lonely chapters. His first marriage to Justine Musk ended in divorce after 8 years, a painful chapter in his life that left him questioning his priorities. He later married actress Tallulah Riley, but that union too ended in divorce. Despite the constant stream of groundbreaking innovations, Elon often found himself at odds with his own emotions. The toll his work took on his personal relationships left him feeling disconnected, yearning for something deeper, something that wasn't measured in dollar signs or the number of rockets launched. That's when he began questioning his purpose. What's it all for? He had asked himself time and time again. The relentless pursuit of progress was consuming him. His companies, despite their success, seemed to keep him tethered to a never-ending cycle of meetings, planning, and problem-solving. He was building the future, literally, but the price of that vision was taking a toll on his ability to connect with the present. And then there was Anna. Anna had once been a promising college student in her late teens. Like many young people, she dreamed of making a difference in the world. She had a knack for art and technology, and at one point, she even considered pursuing a career in design or digital media. But life, as it often does, threw her a curveball. Anna had been dealt a difficult hand. A series of bad decisions, a lack of support, and unfortunate circumstances led her into homelessness. After dropping out of school, she struggled to find stable work. Her past was filled with difficult memories of betrayals, broken promises, and failed attempts to rebuild. She was caught in a cycle of temporary shelters, food banks, and dead-end jobs that never seemed to provide the opportunity she longed for. Anna's story wasn't unique. It was one of thousands of stories told by people who had fallen through the cracks of society. But what made her different was that she still had hope, a small, flickering flame deep inside her that told her life could be better than this. She wasn't willing to give up on herself, even though it often felt like the world had given up on her. Elon had no idea why he stopped that day. It wasn't something he typically did. He was a man on a mission, always moving, always planning the next big thing. But there was something about Anna's eyes, the sadness mixed with hope, that made him feel like this moment mattered. There was something in the way she looked at him that stirred something in his heart, something that reminded him of the times when he, too, had been unsure of his place in the world. Perhaps he saw in her a reflection of himself, a person caught between dreams and reality. Anna's face, worn from hardship, had a quiet resilience about it that Elon couldn't ignore. In her, he saw the human cost of the systems he'd spent his life trying to change. The world was filled with people like her, people struggling, surviving, hoping for a better life. But it wasn't enough to just see her. He realized he couldn't just walk away from someone in need. Not anymore. As they walked toward the car, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something bigger. The questions that had been swirling in his mind for months. What is the true purpose of success? What is the real impact I can have on the world? We're starting to find an answer. Helping Anna, in whatever way he could, might be the key to unlocking something far more important than just creating a new product or breaking another record. In that moment, he made a silent vow to himself. This wouldn't be a passing gesture, a one-time act of kindness. No, he was going to do more. I can do more, he thought. I have to do more. Elon didn't know where this new path would lead, but one thing was clear. His life had just been redirected. And Anna, the young woman with the cardboard sign and the flicker of hope in her eyes, was the catalyst for that change. As they got into the car, Elon turned to her and said, "Let's get you something to eat first. Then we'll figure out how we can get you back on your feet." Anna hesitated, unsure of how to respond. No one had ever talked to her like that. No one had ever made her feel like she was worth more than just a few spare coins thrown into a cup. But there was something different about Elon. Maybe it was the sincerity in his voice, or maybe it was just the fact that someone important, actually cared. "Thank you," Anna whispered, her voice barely audible. "You don't have to do this." But Elon smiled. "I think I do." The days that followed Elon's spontaneous act of kindness were a blur, yet filled with quiet significance. What seemed like a small gesture, stopping for a homeless girl, was rapidly transforming into something much larger. Elon found himself reflecting more than usual on his life, his choices, and the growing realization that his success had given him a unique opportunity to make a lasting change. But this wasn't just about helping one person. He knew, deep down, that something needed to be done on a much bigger scale. Anna, on the other hand, was still grappling with the whirlwind that had suddenly been thrust into her life. For years, she had lived on the fringes of society, invisible and discarded by the system. The kindness she had received from Elon was something she could hardly comprehend at first. It wasn't just the food or the immediate help. It was the belief in her potential, a belief that had been extinguished long ago by the harshness of life on the streets. When Elon first offered to take her to a shelter, Anna had been hesitant. She wasn't used to trusting people, especially people who had the means to change her life. She thought of the many others who had offered help before, only to vanish once they realized the true weight of her circumstances. But Elon's insistence was different. It wasn't pity she saw in his eyes. It was empathy. Over the next few days, as Anna settled into a small temporary apartment that Elon had arranged for her, the two spent more time together. Elon didn't just check in with her once and disappear like so many others did. He genuinely wanted to help. But as their interactions grew, so did the complexity of their relationship. At first, Elon had simply viewed Anna as someone in need of support, a person who was momentarily lost but could be helped. But something deeper was emerging between them. Anna's resilience, her wit, and her intelligence sparked something in Elon he hadn't expected, an emotional connection. She wasn't just a charity case. She was a person with a past, a future, and dreams that hadn't yet been realized. Still, Elon struggled with the pull of his ambitions. The overwhelming demands of his companies were always looming over him. Tesla's latest model needed tweaking, SpaceX had its next launch scheduled, and Neuralink's progress was always on his mind. Every minute spent helping Anna felt like time he could have used to push his businesses forward. One night, after a particularly frustrating meeting with his team at Tesla, Elon found himself thinking about Anna again. He had promised her a better future, but how much could he really do for someone like her? The guilt and pressure of his responsibilities weighed heavily on him, even as the memory of her face, so full of gratitude and surprise, remained in his mind. It wasn't just about helping Anna. His actions had sparked something bigger, a movement, perhaps, or an obligation he didn't fully understand yet. There were thousands, even millions, of people like Anna in the world. Could he fix that? Could he change it all? Was it his job to? The internal struggle gnawed at him. He wasn't sure if this was some fleeting moment of altruism or the beginning of something more profound. But if it was the latter, could he balance his world-changing ventures with something so deeply personal? Anna, meanwhile, was struggling with her own demons. Her past had been full of disappointment and betrayal. Her life on the streets had taught her to trust no one, least of all a billionaire who seemed to live in a different world entirely. But Elon's constant support, his patience, and his interest in her well-being were slowly breaking down the walls she had so carefully constructed. One afternoon, as Anna was sitting in the apartment, she received a call from her estranged brother, who she hadn't heard from in years. The call was short, uncomfortable. He was in trouble, deep trouble, and needed her help. The old instincts kicked in. Help her family, help him, as she always had. But now, Anna was in a different place. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was starting to believe that maybe she deserved better. She wasn't sure she could go back to the life she had once known, even if it was for family. When she spoke to Elon about it, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "Elon," she said, her voice tight with hesitation, "I got a call today. It's from my brother. He's in trouble. I don't know if I can just turn my back on him." Elon leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowing as he considered her words. He had come to care about Anna deeply, and the last thing he wanted was to see her fall back into a toxic situation. "I understand," he replied carefully, "but you've worked so hard to get to this point. I know what it's like to want to help family. But remember, you can't help others if you're not taking care of yourself first." Anna didn't know how to respond to that. She had always put her family first, even at the cost of her own well-being. Was this the right time to change that habit? Could she really cut ties with her past? Elon watched her, knowing how painful this decision was for her. He could see the struggle in her eyes, torn between family loyalty and the promise of a better future. For the first time, he realized just how much power he had to change the trajectory of her life. But that power came with responsibility, and responsibility brought with it the weight of difficult decisions. "I want to help you, Anna," Elon said softly, "but I can't do it for you. You need to make the decision that's best for you." Anna's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she nodded silently, as though she was starting to understand the gravity of the decision she had to make. And so, the internal conflict between them began to rise, a struggle between the past and the future, between survival and self-worth. As their bond deepened, so did the pressure to choose between what was comfortable and what was unknown. It was no longer just about helping a homeless girl. It was about a much bigger transformation, and it would require sacrifices neither of them were fully prepared to make. It had been weeks since Elon's chance encounter with Anna, and despite all the changes in both their lives, something still felt incomplete. For Elon, it wasn't just about the logistical support he had given her, the apartment, the food, the counseling. It was about something deeper, something more profound than anything his business empire had ever offered. Anna had become a mirror to his own struggles, forcing him to confront questions he had long avoided. But as their relationship grew, so did the complexity. Elon had grown attached to Anna in a way he hadn't expected. He admired her strength, her ability to bounce back from hardship. But he couldn't deny that his responsibilities, his companies, were always pulling him in a million directions. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink. He had built his empire by staying focused, driven, and relentless. The world was watching, and there was always the next milestone to hit, the next big leap to make. But now, standing at a crossroads in his personal life, Elon was starting to question whether he had been too single-minded all these years. Anna, too, felt the pressure. Her past life, the streets, her brother's call, were never far from her mind. Every time she had to make a decision about her future, she was haunted by the familiar pull of her old life. The people who had betrayed her, the promises broken, the pain of always being on the edge of survival. It all lingered in the background of her new life. Could she truly leave it all behind? Could she embrace a future with someone like Elon, someone so different from everything she had known? The journey they were on together had just begun, but neither of them could shake the feeling that the stakes were higher than they'd ever imagined. Then, everything changed in an instant. It was late afternoon when Elon received a call that would turn his world upside down. He had just returned from a meeting about SpaceX's next Mars mission when the phone buzzed in his pocket. He saw the name on the screen, his CFO at Tesla, Elon. The voice on the other end was urgent. "We've got a problem." A knot formed in his stomach. "What's going on?" "Tesla's stock has plummeted. Something went wrong with our latest product launch. The press is all over it, and if we don't fix this quickly, we could lose billions." Elon's mind immediately shifted into work mode. "I'll be there in an hour. Get the team ready." But as he looked out the window, toward the small apartment where Anna was staying, a part of him hesitated. Could he afford to step away from this crisis? Could he leave her on her own, even though she was still finding her feet in this new life? The weight of his responsibilities was starting to feel unbearable. "I'll be back soon," he said to Anna later that evening, as he rushed out the door. She looked up from the small desk where she had been writing, her face filled with a quiet understanding. She had come to rely on him, just as he had relied on her to remind him of what mattered outside of his work. "I know," Anna replied softly, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. "I'll be fine." As Elon drove to Tesla's headquarters, his mind raced. The problem with the launch had to be fixed, and fast. He was used to navigating corporate crises, but this felt different. The anxiety gnawed at him in a way that was unfamiliar. In all his years of building companies, he had never felt this torn between his relentless drive to succeed and his newfound desire to build something more meaningful, something that would create lasting change. As he sat through countless hours of meetings, trying to piece together the pieces of the Tesla debacle, his thoughts kept drifting back to Anna. She was facing her own crisis, one that didn't have a simple fix. Her brother had been in and out of trouble for years, and this time, he was asking for help. He needed her to come to him, to be there for him the way she always had. But what about her future? What about the life she was trying to build? Could she really go back to the past, to the cycle of neglect and disappointment that had brought her so much pain? Anna didn't know what to do. She had promised herself she wouldn't fall back into that old life. But her family needed her. They always had. The pull was stronger than she had anticipated, and the pressure was mounting. She felt torn between the security of her new life with Elon and the deep loyalty she felt toward the brother who had always been there for her, until he hadn't. But how could she leave him now, when he was finally asking for help? The decision weighed heavily on her mind as she walked through the empty streets of the city late that night, the glow of streetlights casting long shadows behind her. It felt like the world was pressing down on her from all sides. As the days passed, Anna struggled to make a choice. She spoke to Elon about her brother's situation, explaining the tug-of-war she felt inside. Elon listened, offering her no easy answers, only his support. But the more they talked, the more Anna realized that this wasn't just about her brother. It was about her. It was about the woman she was becoming and the choices she would have to make to move forward. She wasn't the same person she had been when Elon first found her on the street. That woman had been lost, a shell of who she could be. But now, Anna saw a future that was hers to shape, a future that wasn't defined by her past. And yet, there was one thing she hadn't expected. The pull of her old life, the family, the dysfunction, the years of uncertainty, wasn't just in her mind. It was in her heart. The moment of reckoning was approaching. Could she truly walk away from everything she had known, everything that had shaped her? Would she be able to leave behind the chaos of her past in order to fully embrace the future that Elon was offering her? Elon, too, was facing his own crossroads. He could feel it. The weight of his ambitions, his companies, the expectations of the world. He knew that he could never be the same again. He wasn't sure how far he could go down this new path, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't ignore the calling anymore. As both of their worlds collided, they realized that they were about to take the next step on their journeys, not just as individuals, but as a pair. And that next step would determine everything. The stakes were higher than they had ever been before. The weight of the decisions hanging over both Elon and Anna grew unbearable. It wasn't just about the business crises or the past that tugged at Anna's heart. This was about what their lives could become. Could they truly change their paths? Could they allow themselves to be vulnerable, to embrace a future they both longed for but were unsure how to reach? For Elon, the breakthrough came unexpectedly. As he sat in his office, reviewing the press coverage surrounding the Tesla debacle, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Anna. He hadn't heard from her in hours, and with everything happening in his world, he was beginning to worry. He opened the message, which read, "I'm meeting with my brother tomorrow. I think I have to do this. I'm not sure if it's the right choice, but I need to face my past if I want to move forward. I don't know what that means for us. I just need to do this." Elon stared at the screen, a mix of emotions swirling in his chest. His mind quickly shifted back to the days when he first decided to help Anna, when he thought he could give her a fresh start. He had thought she was ready to leave everything behind. But now, he realized, her past was not something that could be easily discarded. It was a part of who she was, and no amount of support or generosity could erase it. He immediately sent her a response, "I understand. Whatever you need, I'm here. But remember, whatever happens, you're not doing this alone." Elon leaned back in his chair, his thoughts turning inward. As much as he wanted to be the one to help Anna move forward, he knew now that this was her journey. It had always been. His job was simply to be there when she needed him. But he also understood that there were limits to what he could do. Some things, like healing, could not be rushed. Meanwhile, Anna sat in her small apartment, staring at the message Elon had sent. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable. She wasn't just an orphan of the streets anymore. She was a woman grappling with real emotions, real relationships. She didn't know if she was ready for what was to come. But she knew this meeting with her brother, this confrontation with her past, was inevitable. It was part of her healing, part of the person she needed to become. The next day, Anna stood outside a small cafe in the heart of the city. She hadn't seen her brother in years, and the anticipation weighed on her chest like a stone. She glanced at the entrance, expecting him to walk through at any moment, but he didn't. A part of her felt relief. Maybe he wouldn't show up, and she could escape this whole mess. But then, the door creaked open, and there he was. Her brother, dressed in a worn jacket and shoes that had seen better days, stood there, looking lost. His face was tired, his eyes hollow. The man who had once been her protector, the one who had made promises to her, was now just another broken soul. "Anna," he said softly, almost like a whisper, "I never thought you'd come." She didn't know what to say. The man in front of her was a ghost of the person she had known. "I came because you need help," she replied. "But this time, it's not just about me helping you. It's about me helping myself." Her brother looked down, the weight of her words settling in. "I never wanted to drag you down," he muttered. "But I did. I know. And I don't know how to fix that. I've made mistakes, Anna. Big ones. But I don't know how to get out of this mess." Tears welled up in Anna's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She didn't have time to dwell on the past anymore. Not when her future was waiting. "I've tried. You know? I've tried to move on, to leave everything behind. But you're still here, pulling me back into the mess you've created. I can't keep doing that. Not if I want a better life. Not if I want to be better." Her brother's face twisted with regret. "I don't want to pull you back. I never meant for you to feel like that." Anna took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. This wasn't just about him. It was about her too. And it wasn't enough to keep rescuing him if it meant losing herself in the process. "Listen," she said firmly, "I can't help you the way I used to. I can't just drop everything to fix your problems. You have to help yourself too. I've been trying to do that for myself. And you should too." The silence between them was thick, heavy with unspoken truths. Anna didn't know if her brother would ever change. She didn't know if he was capable of it. But at that moment, she realized she couldn't keep carrying his weight anymore. She had her own path to walk. As Anna walked away from the cafe, her heart was torn. Part of her wanted to go back, to stay with her brother, to try again. But she knew deep down that this was the hardest and most important decision she could make. Letting go of her past wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Later that night, Anna found herself sitting on the small couch in her apartment, scrolling through her messages. Elon had reached out to her again. This time, his message was different. "I hope you're okay. I'm proud of you. Remember, you're not alone." Tears sprang to her eyes. It wasn't just that he was there. It was that he truly understood. He hadn't tried to force her into any particular choice. He had just given her the space to make it on her own. And in that moment, Anna knew something that she hadn't fully understood before. She wasn't just choosing between her past and her future. She was choosing to believe in herself, to trust that she was worthy of a better life, regardless of the mistakes she had made or the family she had left behind. Elon had given her the tools to heal, but ultimately, it was up to her to do the work. As she stared out the window, watching the city lights flicker, Anna made a promise to herself. She would no longer be a victim of her circumstances. She would forge a path forward, no matter how hard or uncertain it seemed. And with Elon's quiet support, she knew she wouldn't have to face it alone. The emotional climax of her journey had arrived, and it was only the beginning. The weeks that followed Anna's meeting with her brother felt like a whirlwind. The sense of closure she had been desperately seeking was slow to come, but the decision to leave her past behind had already begun to change her in ways she couldn't fully understand. With Elon's unwavering support, she started to rebuild the pieces of her life, one small step at a time. For Elon, the changes were just as profound. While the world was still watching his every move, waiting for the next big innovation, the next groundbreaking launch. He had begun to recognize that there was more to life than just accomplishments. There was a deeper, quieter victory in the connections he had forged, in the relationships that grounded him, especially with Anna. One evening, as the setting sun painted the sky in hues of gold and pink, Elon found himself reflecting on how far he had come. He sat in his office, the soft hum of Tesla's operations in the background, but his mind was miles away. In the years he had spent building his companies, he had been laser-focused on one thing: success. But now, as he glanced over at the family pictures on his desk, he realized that the true measure of success was not how many rockets he had launched or how many electric cars were on the road. It was about the lives he touched, the people he helped, and the relationships that made him feel like he was more than just a tech mogul. His thoughts shifted to Anna. It hadn't been easy for her, this journey of healing and discovery. It never was. But what had amazed him was her resilience. Despite the scars of her past, despite the people who had let her down, she was standing tall, ready to face whatever the future held. He was proud of her. And, for the first time in a long while, Elon Musk wasn't thinking about the next space mission or the next innovation. He was thinking about something much more personal. He was thinking about Anna and how her strength had become a beacon in his own life. Anna, too, was reflecting on everything she had learned in the past few months. The journey had been difficult, and at times, the road ahead had seemed impossible. But now, she could see the horizon more clearly. She had faced her past, and it hadn't broken her. It had only made her stronger. Anna was no longer the girl who had stood on the streets, begging for a chance. She was a woman who had taken control of her story, who had chosen a new path. And that path was filled with possibility. She had learned that it wasn't about where she came from, but where she was going. The future was hers to shape. One morning, Anna stood by the window, gazing out at the busy city below. It had been months since she first met Elon, and while the world had continued to turn, everything in her life felt different. She was no longer defined by the circumstances of her birth or her family. She was defined by her choices to trust herself, to seek help when she needed it, and to stand up for what she believed in. Her phone buzzed with a message from Elon. "There's something I've been thinking about. Something I want to ask you." Anna's heart skipped a beat. The uncertainty she had carried with her for so long was starting to fade, replaced with a sense of hope. "What is it?" she typed back. Elon's response came quickly. "How would you feel about making this official? About sharing a life together?" Anna's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't the question she had expected, but in that moment, it was the question that felt right. The question that felt like a new beginning. Her hands shook slightly as she typed her reply. "I think I'd like that. More than you know." The phone call came shortly after, and they spoke for what felt like hours. They talked about their fears, their hopes, their dreams. And through it all, one thing became abundantly clear. Their lives were no longer separate. They had built something together, something stronger than the sum of their individual parts. As the weeks turned into months, Anna and Elon's relationship deepened. Their bond, built on trust and mutual respect, had become a source of strength for both of them. Elon continued to pour his heart into his work, but he did so with a renewed sense of balance. He no longer felt like he had to sacrifice his personal life for his professional one. Anna had taught him that there was no greater success than the people you love. As for Anna, she found herself thriving in ways she hadn't imagined possible. The woman who had once walked the streets, unsure of her next meal, was now building a life that was rich in meaning and purpose. Her past, though never far from her thoughts, was no longer a burden. It had shaped her, but it didn't define her. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their shared apartment, watching the city lights flicker below, Elon turned to Anna with a look of quiet admiration. "I don't think I could have ever imagined a life like this," he said. "With you. With everything we've been through." Anna smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. "Neither did I. But sometimes, life surprises you. And when it does, you have to be ready to embrace it." The two sat in silence, each of them reflecting on their own journey. They had come from different worlds, had faced different battles, and yet here they were, together, not just as individuals, but as partners, sharing a future they had built together. In that moment, they both understood something that had taken them months to fully grasp. Life was unpredictable. It was messy. It was full of struggles and challenges. But it was also full of beauty, growth, and the chance to change. Elon Musk had stopped his car for a homeless girl, and in doing so, had sparked a chain of events that had changed both of their lives. It wasn't the car that had been the most important thing that day. It was the decision to stop, to see the humanity in another person, and to believe in the possibility of a better future. And that decision had changed everything. As the night wore on and the city lights glimmered in the distance, Anna and Elon both understood. Sometimes, the most surprising turns in life lead to the most beautiful destinations. And the journey they had taken together, full of twists, turns, and moments of heart-stopping emotion, was just the beginning of the rest of their lives. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they were ready to face it together.